Hey guys, TJ Schwartz here. Welcome back to the Edge and Flow podcast. I am here with my co-host Lucas Burnley. What's up, man?
Hey, what's up? Good to see your face, man.
Yeah, missed another week of recording.
Yeah,
Another
this
another
is
h- holiday meets show schedule meets production schedule
family schedule
situation.
meet. Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know. Right now, I don't know if there's any missing anything. I think this is just kind of like
yeah,
this is the schedule.
yeah. Which this leads into our topic today,
Oh yeah, this is a
which
good one.
is going back on your word
Broken
and the
promises.
implications of that and difficulties and importance sometimes to do it. Like we had mentioned in this podcast before, actually trying to do once a week. I think we tried to set that goal maybe a few episodes back. Obviously, we've struggled, especially this time of year. So we've got a list of things we've been kind of changing with regard to the things we've been saying publicly and then the things we actually decide to do. So,
Yeah, adaptive strategy.
yeah, yeah.
Right. This ties into because I felt like we were kind of up for a shop like update,
Hmm.
and basically the shop update is that you and I have just been lying to ourselves
Yep.
for a while. So,
Yep.
you want to go first? Do you want
Yeah, I
to?
can.
Because all right, so here's where TJ is at right now. TJ just began pre-orders for a new model. What is the new model name?
Confidant.
The Confidant. Oh, that
Yeah.
ties into this as well, kind of.
Hmm.
Um, where did you break your promise?
So I've been working on this. I've mentioned it on the podcast, this new knife. I've been conceptualizing it, 3D printing it, holding it, and I didn't want to reveal a single thing about it besides that it existed in the ether. And I was thinking that I would have blades ground, heat treated, like basically getting close to assembly and shipping by the time I even said or displayed it publicly in any way. And I think I'd mentioned that even like 2 episodes ago on the pod. And well, I launched a pre-order this weekend, so that's not what happened. And there's reasons for that, and so that's what we can dive into.
All right, let's hear reasons. So first, what was your reason for saying that you would not do a pre-order?
Saying that I would not is the number one reason with the pre-order is if the knife doesn't physically fully exist yet, like it's prototyped in theory, it's using the processes of the Overland. I believe there's a low risk. If it was a folder, that'd be different. But with a fixed blade, I believe I'm approaching it in a way that there's not a risk that I won't be able to fulfill. But I don't want to take full payment for something that I don't have an actual like photography of. That just seems
Right.
sketchy.
You do not have a
And
proven physical product.
yeah, and
Right.
it just taking full payment on that doesn't seem right. And so what happened was I had you maybe even bounced the idea off me of taking deposits, and it had crossed my mind. But to me, the problem with that was going to be the logistics because if I have a large volume of orders come time to ship, and I
Yep.
have to seek out final payment, I was worried about the logistics of that because it's like you email all these people, half of them don't respond, or it goes to their spam email. You're tracking people down. Like I had this fear of it growing into a problem.
Right.
But what I found was I have the Wix, and this was the pivotal moment. I have the I think the deposit model was the right move if the logistics were going to work, because with the deposit model, I get to know what people are wanting. So volume,
Right.
how many are Cerakoted, what color it handles, how many, what kind of sheath am I making, because I can't really know until I have orders, right?
Right.
And so, but what pivoted it, like I said, was that I went on my Wix website platform. Wix is what I use. It's just a kind of a generic software for making a website. And they have invoicing on there. And so when someone orders a product for me, like let's say they paid for this Confidant, they, put down their small deposit. And then what it is they're also paying shipping and additional options up front.
Right.
So their deposit plus like $20, $30, depending on what else they're getting on there. And
How
then
much did you do as a deposit percentage
so
or?
it's $45 for the deposit,
Yep.
and then they pay their shipping, and they pay if they wanted Cerakote or whatever. It was a little bit more, so it could be like $50 to $80
I
depending
like
on
that.
what.
Yeah. So
eh,
you're paying your options, you're paying the
Yeah,
logistics,
and the
and
reason
then
for that is when I go to actually take final payment inside of Wix, all I have to do is go to each order, and I can click on the guy's name or gal's name that ordered the knife, and send invoice directly to them inside of Wix, and then it confirms that it was paid to me inside of Wix and it's associated with that order.
Right.
And because of the way I set up the pre-order, everyone will owe me the same amount of money. So there's no tracking down like that. Oh, this person got these options,
Right.
so it's a little bit different number.
Yep.
They all owe me a flat rate when it's ready to ship. So once I see inside of Wix that their invoice is paid, it goes.
That's
And so
beautiful. That's actually
it's
a really elegant solution.
hmm
Well, and what I like about the deposit kind of method is just that you have skin in the game.
yep.
I think that a small deposit, it doesn't have to be large, like
hmm
that is nominally, that is a pretty small amount of money, but it lets you gather a lot of data based on something that you haven't made yet. Like you said, you're going to need to have some of those metrics just to plan the run and maybe a
hmm
little over.
hmm
Now you actually have some information that allows you to do
Exactly.
that in
Yeah.
an educated way.
Yep. And part of it is I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. I'm actually my buddies over at Tactile Turn Knife Company. They have this sweet Seatman knife grinder. I'm going to work with them on bevels on this. I want to see what they can do as far as grinding goes. And so
Nice.
there's a minimum order quantity that comes in that's never been a part of the overland that I've done in the past. And
Yep.
so for me, if I needed like a few more knives beyond because the orders were more than I expected, I couldn't really do that without doing a whole new batch
Right.
to them. So that was why the pre-order partially became the option. But
Right.
once again, the clicking moment was when I found the Wix platform had such a like integrated deposit model. Then it was like, oh yeah, that's for sure the way to do it. Um, yeah, I think it should go really smooth.
I think it's prime, man, because you're proving a concept too, which is like planning around small business, like can't really be dogmatic.
hmm
Like it has to adapt.
hmm
So as your information is updated, you're able to update your plan.
Yeah.
Very rarely when we're starting a project or a process are you able to see like all of the steps, or like the ability to have that, like the grinding outsourced.
hmm
Like that may have come in at a point where you had one plan. This new information actually allowed you to modify and then move forward from there.
hmm Yeah.
Right. It's
And
pretty
ultimately,
critical.
the other thing is this isn't a one time thing because I plan to bring out more fixed blade models.
Right.
And I was talking to my wife about this. I was like, I need this process to work every time. It's not just a one time thing.
Yep.
And this deposit model is probably going to be more reliable down the road. So it's like I have to do something repeatable. Like we've said, the process is the product. Like
Yep.
the process needs to be right, and this seems right. So
Well, and you're
we'll
you're
see.
you're you're kind of evolving the process as you go, right? Like I saw that you just integrated Kanban.
Yeah. hmm
That's huge. You only have to do that once,
hmm
right? Like now that is part of the process.
Yeah. Especially when it's customer facing, because
Yeah.
your customers start to learn like this is what to expect.
Yeah.
So if every drop, like if it becomes too erratic or
Yep.
unpredictable, people like don't want to read like paragraphs on like
Right.
what's happening, I guess.
Details. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, that's kind of it. Like you had a plan, you did not stick to it.
Yep. That's correct.
It still works.
hmm
All right.
We'll see. I think it'll work.
Yeah. Well,
So,
again,
so
I
far, so
think
good.
so. I think if I remember our original conversation, like, I have fears around like releasing before I know that something works, right?
hmm
However, in a prototype scenario, that's completely rational.
hmm
This model is essentially an extension of the process that you have built for the overland.
hmm
So your process is the product, right? You already have a proven process. You're not integrating changes of a nature that would completely trash that model.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you can go into it knowing like, all right, I know I can do this. I know like
hmm
all of these steps work. The one outlier you have is them being ground on a Seatman,
The bevel grinding. Yep.
right? But that now is essentially a known quantity too.
Yep.
But it's still a problem that has to be solved.
Yep. It's kind of it's a variable in a vacuum. It's like
It's
all the
right.
other variables are somewhat dialed to where if some parts of it are slower than I expect, it'll still be doable at the very least. But the bevel grinding is like the isolated large change. And I'd be willing on each subsequent batch to maybe make one more isolated adaptation. Because the process, you don't want it to be stagnant. You want it to grow. But you
That
don't want
brings
to
up a
change
really
everything all the
no, that
time.
brings up a really, really good point, which is when you make changes, it's like scientific method essentially, right?
Exactly.
Like you make one change and you see how that affects the outcome.
Exactly.
If you make 3 changes, like I run into this a lot of times with some, like usually around fitting, right? So say I'm fitting a lock and I run into a problem. I'm like, my lock's sticking. And in the back of my head, I think of 3 things that could be causing this. The chances of me essentially destroying the knife by approaching all 3 things at once is huge.
Right.
If I just address one thing and see if it affects it, and then on the next level, address the next thing, but not the first thing, then the third, each one of those, I'm going to get to see what the effect actually is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think from a product development standpoint or production cycle, that is a huge kind of, I guess not like a hack, but it's just like a best practice.
Yep. Isolating
Like
variables.
it's like
Yep.
not falling, going faster than you want to fall from,
Yeah.
kind of,
Right.
right? You're like,
Right.
man, you can't risk it. If you did 3 things outsourced, all of a sudden you might it might just tank the whole process.
Yeah. It gets turns into a rat's nest real fast.
That's pretty
So,
cool.
so yeah, I look forward to it. It's going to be cool. I kind of told my wife, like, the way I'm looking at 2023 is I spent 2022 building this process, like, largely because I got a new machine in, got equipment in, got my shop all fixed up, power and everything. And it's like I felt like it was kind of like loading the chamber for a year and
Yep.
still putting out a lot of knives, but like a lot of times, like, it felt like I was limping getting knives out the door because I was adapting so fast.
Yep.
And so 2023 is kind of like, okay, now it's time to, like, aim and fire. Like, this
Right.
process is now time. It's like time for prime time kind of thing,
Yeah.
and just see how it goes.
It's so exciting.
So
It's
I'm
new
looking forward
year.
to it.
Yeah,
Yep.
man.
So
Nice. What's the ETA on the new model?
so it just got water jet this morning. It's getting
Nice.
surface ground quickly. I mean, soon-ish. I mean,
Yep.
the guy that does my water jetting over at
Yep.
Survive Knives does the surface grinding as well. So it'll get
Nice.
surface ground. It'll come to me because I'm not milling the bevels. I can mill the whole batch pretty fast because I'm milling
Yep.
perimeters, chamfers, whatever engraving. And so it should be relatively quick to get it to heat treat. Then from heat treat to grinding, and then once it's ground and back to me, it'll be pretty much ready to go out the door because I'll be working on the handles and getting those somewhat inventoried, but
Yep.
in the meantime. So the only thing, once the knives come back to me, the only from grinding, the only thing that's going to be a little bit of a barrier is I don't want to make any sheaths until I have them back from grinding,
Right.
because I don't know the exact geometry that the grind is going to be.
Right.
So that's like the one question mark, but that's, the sheaths are it's fine if
It's
I
minor.
do them
The only
all
other
at the
thing that I
end.
can see is maybe a variation in your final finishing process. That's the only other thing I can kind of like spot out of the gate
As
from a
far
time
as,
standpoint. As far as like stoning out the blades to get to where you need to be for like blast and tumble.
yeah, and we're gonna see. I guess we'll just see what the Seatman can do
Yeah.
in that regard. I might, obviously, I'll try one without stoning it and see
Yeah.
where we're at,
Yeah.
and see what kind of degree of hand finishing is there. I don't know. So that's where this variable is going to come in. Is I think the bevels are going to turn out great. Seatman's a amazing German-made machine. They're very talented over at Tactile Knife Company. They're going to do a good job. But the question is, to get to my standards, what on the tail end of that needs to happen? I don't know. Maybe nothing.
Right.
Maybe a
Maybe
lot of
nothing.
things.
You don't know
We'll
what you don't
see.
know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's.
But I know it's going to be better than what I have now, because what I have now is very geometrically perfect, but the finish is not going to be the finish from the Seatman is going to be better than what my mill is doing. It just
There you
is.
go. That's
And
that's
so,
calculated then.
yeah, it's just ground surfaces are better than milled surfaces, bar none.
Right.
End of story. That's
Right.
just always true.
All right.
So
There you go.
yeah.
You want to hear mine?
Yeah. Let's go with you.
Let's go. Mine's messy. I don't even know if it's going to make sense.
Okay.
But I just got back from the Kentucky Custom Knife Show, Kicks, which is arguably, it is one of my favorite shows. It's just so well done. It's a 4-hour show inside of like a 3-day weekend. So you essentially, you show up Thursday night. They usually do like a little bottle share. really fun. Friday morning, they do a whiskey tour, and it's like a big tour bus. Everybody splits, goes and looks at distilleries.
Ooh.
This year we did Maker Mark.
They make whiskey in
Makers,
Kentucky.
yeah, man,
I didn't
it's
know
so
that.
yeah, right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Just a little runs like water.
Yeah.
But man, it's so cool. Like just getting to spend time in the distilleries, like and see again process, right? Like it's wild. Like there's one place that makes all of the stills from basically
Hmm.
like all of the distilleries.
Hmm.
I'm trying to get it to where next year we get to go tour them. That would be pretty neat.
Yeah.
So basically you
That'd
do
be
that.
sick.
It's very like community forward, right? It's the reason you're doing the show is to go spend time with people. I was really lucky this time. My bus mate, my whiskey buddy was Nick Rossi.
Nice.
So this is just great, man. Like get to spend a day on a bus, like driving around drinking whiskey
Hmm.
and looking at cool machines.
Dude, I missed out.
You missed out. I mean, it's
Should've
pretty
been there.
good. It's pretty good. And then they have a show Saturday night that's 4 hours, and then you're headed home Sunday.
That's
So,
fantastic. I
yeah,
love this
really cool
this
format.
new era show that seems to be developing. This
Yep.
show style.
Yep.
That
Yep.
sounds
And I think
really
a lot of the
cool.
new shows actually owe a debt to Kicks because they were really one of the first. It started as like a local meet and greet.
Hmm.
It just kind of
Just
expanded.
grew.
Yeah, it just grew, and they did it the right way. They keep it small.
I found out how many knife makers like whiskey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is about the most natural fit.
Yeah.
It's also cool just from the standpoint of a show. Like you go to Blade, one of the best things is hanging out at the pit, right? That's like the thing.
Hmm.
The show is at a small hotel. The hotel is where everybody hangs out. Downstairs, there's a bar, there's a restaurant. So you have all of kind of the elements you need for that kind of social, just spending time in the place that you're staying, that the show is.
What is
But
the
it's
airport?
so you fly into LEX, Bluegrass, I think is so it's just like the Lexington airport.
Nice.
Yeah, man, really, really, really cool.
I'm happy for you. That sounded like a good time. And
It was good.
And this was a show that you were kind of tense about going into.
So
because
here's my broken promises. So as we've discussed, like the last couple of years, super hectic, lots going on, both around the business, around kids. And so I've really reduced the amount of shows that I'm doing. This year, I had agreed to go to Blade Show, but not display, go to Blade Show West, but not display. The latter of which you went to with me, and we had a great time. And I did a small show in Portland that essentially is that same format, like 4 hours, and spend time with people. Coming out of that one, I was like, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
That was my show for the year. And I knew my reasons. And then I agreed to do Kentucky. So that was broken promise number one. That one was essentially to myself. Luckily, I feel like a lot of these, like, and what we're talking about, these are internalized broken promises.
And at the same time, I'm noticing they're not promises that we said we would do and then we didn't. It's the opposite. It's something we said we wouldn't do and we did.
Yeah. So, okay. So here's where round two comes in. At the time that I committed to the show, I greatly overestimated the amount of time that I would have to prepare for the show. And this is like, yeah, I don't know, man. I don't even know what I was thinking. Like I forgot we had a trip to New Mexico to visit my dad. I had my in-laws in town. We had Thanksgiving, which we were like hosting. And as I look and I go, man, like I'm watching the days go by, and I'm watching like weeks go by where I'm not getting the hours in the shop to like make a viable show. I will also say that a lot of this stuff is like kind of charged because like as a maker, when you do a show, especially one of these shows, right? That's not like your standard trade show. You're doing like a really grassroots, like community-based show. You want to like bring the heat, right? You want to bring really good work. You want to bring things that you know people are going to be excited about. And if I don't feel like I can do that, I start to instantly like shut down. I get so frustrated, right? I don't like to fight a weak position. So as I'm coming into kind of the like the all or nothing phase of the show, I look at it and I go, I don't physically see how I can get the amount of work needed done in the time I have allotted without like drastically affecting Maddie and the kids. Right. So I call Scott and I'm like, hey, dude, I messed up. I don't think I can make the show. And this is something that is, it's like multi-pronged, right? Because it's one thing to not follow through on a show. Like things happen. The problem is with a show like Kentucky, people pay for their tickets after they know who is going to be there. And it's hard to be like, hey, like you bought a ticket and it's not like, oh, everyone's coming to see one maker, but collectors go where their favorite makers are going.
If
and
you were the
sometimes
one
they
that
make a decision on
the
a
scale
trip
or something.
Yeah. It could be the one that tipped the scale. And so I was like, look, I'm in the back of my head. I was like, I'm 99% sure that I can't do this right now. I just like hit critical max. I was like, give me 24 hours before I announce it. So in that time, I doubled back again. So I had decided that I wasn't going to do it. Reached out to show promoter, right? Tail between my legs and like let him know. And that's how it is. That night, I just sat back and I really looked at like the reasons that I felt like I couldn't do it. And I realized it was almost all self-inflicted expectations that it wouldn't matter to anybody but me. And so I redirected the amount of time that I had, kind of focused on the highest priority products, but reduced kind of overall what I had expected to bring. Right. So I didn't gain more time, but I created more available time.
Yeah. Squeeze more value out of the time.
Yep. Squeeze more value out of the time. And so, but it was really like, as I was in the process, I was like, man, I got to this point where I was like, no, I feel like I can't do anything right. Like no decision in this process is right. If I grunt through the show, everyone's going to suffer and I'm going to get burned out. Like I don't feel like I'm going to do my highest level work. And then I was like, if I don't go to the show, I'm going to have like crazy guilt around like the feeling of like letting like customers and like, show promoter down, that kind of thing. Very rarely, I think, did these decisions have the ramifications that like we put on them. Like it's like a middle ground. Right. But I will say that I felt at the end very happy with the decision that I did make. And that's the thing. It's like, it's just adaptive strategy, right? There is a point where you're like, if you're not in a point where you're going to have product for a show, like it doesn't make sense to go.
Yeah.
Like we do make mistakes up to a point that can cause catastrophic failure. I think that a lot of times we get, again, like dogmatic about what we consider failure versus like reframing what a success is.
Yeah.
I guess like to like kind of wrap it up, the crazy part about it was that when I got there and I started to put product out, I realized two things. One, I had actually brought like a huge volume.
Nice.
Okay. And I brought two pieces that I actually think may have been two of the best things that I've made so far.
That's awesome.
One was the inlaid tuna. And that was just from a standpoint of like, it's one of the cleanest tunas I've ever built. And I developed that process for cutting inlays that I didn't know. And I did that in that timeline.
I love that knife, man. carbon fiber you put in there. That was
Thank you.
sweet.
Well, and that's what happens. Like a lot of times I start getting show prep and like the creativity goes. I wasted a huge amount of time trying to figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
Not really wasted, but it's like, it's not efficient to do it when you're under the gun.
Yeah.
Right.
And that gets to the point of like decisiveness is difficult, you know, like the analysis paralysis thing. And like, I think you've said it on the pod before, making a decision that might be not the best is better than not making any decision at all.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, sometimes I have to slap myself and just be like, well, this, like with the pre-order thing, I kind of did that. I was like, it just kind of came over me once I saw that Wix thing and I was like, I'm going to do it. I was like, I'm not going to ask anybody. I'm just going to do it. Like, I'm just going to do it. And maybe I'll suffer the consequences, but you could, you know, in your situation, like you could kick the can until you were still agreed to it and you didn't have product to the last second, you know, it could have got worse.
Right. Well, and that's what I looked at. I'm like, when I cut it, right. When I let Scott know, I feel like I really had to make that decision because up until then, I was like thinking about it constantly while I was working. The act of actually saying full stop, I'm not doing this, allowed me to look at it like abstractly after the fact. I have just canceled this process. I've stopped banging my head against the wall. And then from there, because we have this flexibility, you know, I was able to look at it and go, no, that actually was not the right decision. How can I like pick up the pieces from that? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Towards the end of this process, I got the idea for this like bamboo, like hand carved bamboo side pop where I like built this silver coin and like did like jewelry processes that I didn't know how to do on it. Again, not good time. But as I'm sitting at my table and the doors are about to open, I realized that like, it's an awesome show. Like what I brought, not only was there enough of it, but it was very high level.
Yeah. And
so weird.
There's a certain amount of flame underneath you that is the right amount.
Yeah.
And it can stifle creativity if it's too much, but there is a prime amount of heat and pressure that actually creates beauty and like success in architecture and design and anything you're trying to accomplish.
We talk about that in flow state, right? Mm-hmm. Which is there's actually a level of stress that like is going to make you perform better. Yeah. Like I guess like a huge universal ask would be like, it would be amazing to figure out how to just like flip that switch when you actually had enough time and enough resources, you know, and enough of like a buffer. Yeah. But for me, that's never how it's worked.
And I think that's a lifelong pursuit too, to figure out where your threshold is, because that like green zone is different for everyone. And like, I mean, you hear about it in athletics and like MMA and stuff all the time, that there's the people that do really, really well in like sparring, but they fall apart at a high level. And then there's people that are the opposite, that they exceed expectations.
Yeah, like they're not crazy physically fit. They don't have great endurance. And like, so when they're in a sparring scenario, like it's actually not an ideal. And then you put them in the ring, everything gets locked down and they're just an animal.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like,
it's just, all of a sudden they hit that like critical mass of like, this is the right amount of fire under me and it's time to go.
Yeah. So I don't know. It was really interesting, really kind of interesting situation, because I found myself like multiple times throughout the weekend, just being super grateful that I went, and I wasn't stressed at all. I got to spend like a lot of time, you know, hanging out with people. And again, like we've talked, like I'm an introvert, so shows in general kind of take it out of me a little bit. This one didn't.
Let me say this.
Yeah.
Shows can take it out of you and me, but I don't know if I've ever regretted going to a show. Have you?
No, I agree.
Like, it seems like I always am like waffling about shows, like especially post-COVID, like deciding whether to get back on the horse. But I've never regretted it. So I got to remember that when I decide not to go to a show. Like it usually. Like,
yeah, man. I mean, because you're putting yourself into like essentially some variation of a family reunion with the element of financial, you know, opportunity.
Yeah.
It's business, which is, we love business, right?
Mm-hmm.
We love making things. We love talking with people who like those
Yeah.
things.
And
And
an
you're just going to a
extreme
big,
concentration of those types.
yeah. And then it's like, oh, I like to eat food, but I get to do some of that. So if you just kind of like let go of it, I mean, ultimately that's where Blade, like going to big Blade with no table, I struggled with it until I got there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just realized I was like, oh, this is like 80% of the value of the trade show is just being at the trade show.
Yeah.
So
FaceTime.
yeah, I don't know, man. It's just like constantly learning.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it. That's my last show for the year.
Well,
Feels
there's
good.
not much year left, so
I know.
that's all right.
I know, man. And I actually feel pretty good. Like, going into the year, I wasn't sure I was going to do anything. And I ended up doing 4 shows, 2 with product, 2 without.
Mm-hmm.
And the 2 without both had I would say a sizable effect on my overall business.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Good connections, good projects, like just good.
It's fantastic. Yeah. No, you're talking about the 2 Blade shows.
Yeah.
Well, Atlanta and Blade Show
Yeah.
West. Yeah.
Blade Show West.
Excellent shows.
Yeah.
Yeah. I gotta get to more shows. Like I said, going into 2023, like I do want to start hitting shows and stuff and really ramping that up because I do just love it.
I think
it's good.
I'm very excited for you to do like your first show with product.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any, not to like put you on the spot with this, but like, do you have any idea of like, from what you've seen so far, like what is the right fit? Like what's the first show?
First show for me might actually be it'd probably be Blade Show West.
Blade Show West.
Because it's a driving distance for me, so
Yep.
it makes it a lot more approachable. It's the only show that's really that way.
Yep.
And going to Atlanta, like the logistics ramp up by 100 because booth materials and getting
same with Blade Show
bought
Texas.
knives.
Even though it's not as far,
Yeah.
smaller show, you're
Still
still
dealing with the
getting on a
airport.
plane to get there.
Yeah, so Blade Show West is just like a shorter chip shot, and so and I like this show. It was really good this year, so I think coming back next year with product is pretty sensical.
I think
it would be
I
cool.
think it makes a lot of sense. Like I feel like we both had the same opinion of that show, which was like it has quite a bit of potential,
Mm-hmm.
but it's as like right out of the gate. Like even like if you had gone to the first year, you would have done fine.
Mm-hmm.
There was enough people, there was enough money. I spent so many years doing shows in Arizona and Colorado because they were driving distance before I ever did, Blade Show.
Yeah.
And I really like that. I think there's a process kind of getting to the point where you're like, okay, like I've got my knives. I'm like loading them in the car. You have like your show display, driving. It feels like very organic. And I think there's a lot of value before you're like, all right, I'm going to the big show, load up the pallets on the plane.
Wipe that knife down with WD-40 and throw it in the box and jump in the car.
Yeah. I think that I don't know. I guess like, it's just me getting like older and I'm sentimental about it. But I look back on those days very fondly.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, we've talked about this, like anytime I can kind of be a beginner or out of my element or bad at something, I kind of like put a pretty high value on those.
Yeah. A little bit of discomfort to get you going.
Yeah. And also just like it being the right scale for like where you're at. Like you're going to do your first show. There's no reason that you need to go to Atlanta and add all of those additional complications. Back to the idea of adding one extra element. Your element that's changing is going to a show. By adding all of these other elements like flying and like booth setup and like all this other, you're just really, really asking for more problems.
Well, and especially because like in Atlanta, if you guys don't know, it's like a 45-minute drive with traffic from the airport to the show. And so, and then it's just like connecting flights. Like imagine if your box of knives that you were like checking on a flight or something, imagine if it departed you and went to like Dallas on accident and you land in Atlanta,
happened.
Like, ouch.
Yeah. Which has happened many times. I had a really interesting experience flying out of Redmond. So like product hack for people. I learned it from a photographer and I absolutely love it. So, okay, you can check a firearm when you fly. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know what airport you're going into. Like, can't do it going into Newark.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, you have like a locking hard-sided case, like a Pelican. You put your product in that. You place a unloaded, firearm. I like taking a little automatic with the slide open.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even take ammunition or anything, right? Like, it's just in
Yeah.
there. And what that allows you to do is have the box checked by an agent as you're checking in. You then affix your own locks to the box, which is then essentially babysat at the other end. Okay.
Mm.
So you have to go to a special luggage pickup
Yeah.
so say my connecting flight doesn't make it, but my luggage does.
Mm-hmm.
That box just doesn't go out on the standard
On the carriage, on the
turnstile.
carousel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what?
So
It's like a Trojan horse
yeah.
way of doing it.
Right. It's really good.
Yeah.
It's like really good. And I know I feel it gives you a longer timeline than having to ship. And like, I feel pretty confident about it. I've never run into problems. However, it adds a complication at check-in. Okay. Because some people like you can run into a few variations. Some people, a gate agent never checked a firearm. They're unfamiliar with the process. Sometimes they have an attitude about you checking a firearm, depending on where you're flying out of.
Mm-hmm.
In Redmond, they were basically like, oh no, you can't do that. You need to have your firearm in a locking case. And I say, well, it is in a locking case. It's in a locking hard-sided case with dual padlocks that cannot. Well, no, it needs to be locked inside of the case. Really interesting scenario, because I can argue this because it's right.
Yeah.
Or I can try to have them come to the conclusion that this is acceptable.
Yeah.
It added 45 minutes to my check-in time. I almost missed my flight. The gate agent talked to the other gate agents who didn't know, who brought over the manager who didn't know, who brought over TSA, who begrudgingly said, well, no, that's okay. It's in a locking hard-sided case, but you should have it inside of another locking case. And I was like, absolutely. I said, in the future, I said, so if I have a locking pistol case inside of this box, I'm also able to lock this box with my own padlocks. And they said, yes. Where the confusion came around was that it's a big box. It's like a big Pelican. So in the gate agent's mind, it doesn't look like a pistol case.
Mm.
And there's other things in the box. Imagine shipping a rifle and having a bipod, a scope, I don't know, something else in there, right? A sling, and then being like, no, those things can't go in the box. That's essentially the scenario.
Right. Yeah.
But I very quickly realized, because I made the mistake of saying like, I understand, but I've used this exact setup for the past decade. I've flown exactly like this. And she looked at me and said, I don't care. This is not how it's supposed to be. And then I was like, is there any way that we can speak to a TSA agent? It's 3:30 in the morning. I'm like losing my mind.
Yeah.
Like,
that's the hard part about interpretable laws and regulations. Like, that's tough.
Yeah. And they very easily could have just been like, nope, that's not how we're reading it today.
Yep.
So ouch. From the airport, I ordered a little life pod, and moving forward, I will have it double locked. Everything's going to be so locked forever.
Nice.
Yeah. A little bit of
that's good. That's a good tip. I might have rant. I'll keep that in mind.
It works so beautifully, because it just adds a layer of like very subtle security to being able to ship a big box of valuables.
Not to mention your leverage if they were to lose it is probably way higher.
Yes, this is not the box they want to lose. And people fly with firearms all the time, right? Mm-hmm. So this is, and just to like be double redundant, this is checked baggage, which you have to declare. So you have to go up to the gate agent and say, I need to declare a firearm, right? They open it. They put a card inside that is signed by you. Like it's a very known process. Then they close it. Then you put your locks on it. It is the most secure way to fly with valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, the box could get lost, but again, this is not the box that
Yeah.
they want to lose.
Your
Yeah,
recourse
yeah,
is good
yeah.
probably on that. Better
So
than a bag of underwear or something.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So a
Yeah.
long time ago, Ken had his knives for blade show. He's flying over from
Onion.
Hawaii. Yep, Ken Onion was flying over and had all of his knives stolen out of his luggage. I believe it was $100,000 worth of knives. They figured out that it was like an inside job at the airport. So like this is something that like when I was like first going to shows, you know, really was like in my like really stuck with me.
Yeah. Dude, that's horrifying.
I
See
know.
that, and that's why I'm driving to Blade Show West. You
Yep.
know,
Yeah.
because it's going to be in a box that I choose, and it's going to be the box that I like, and it's going to be in the back of my Jeep, and I'm going to drive.
I'm excited for Blade Show West.
And then someone's going to rear end me and
Yeah.
crumple.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, there's no. I had a conversation with a friend today, which is like essentially that like overall safety is an illusion.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like there are many steps that you can take to essentially make your system safer and more robust.
Yeah, due diligence.
Yeah, it's just due diligence, best practice.
So, speaking of best practice,
Yeah.
you mentioned Kanban earlier.
Yeah.
I was talking to Maddie about the Kanban. Do you think you guys are going to try to do that?
Oh yeah, we're gonna try to do it. I sent her all your videos, and I was like, just watch this, and she watched it, and she was like, ugh.
Yeah, yeah. The Kanban thing, dude, has been good.
Yeah.
It's only been a week, and I immediately it's not like I've even utilized it. It hasn't like saved my butt yet,
Right.
But the peace of mind that I feel, it's like I always have this nag of like you're missing something. Like you're gonna go to assemble this knife, you're gonna pull out the drawer, and there's gonna be one thing missing.
Yep.
And it's like there's always that little fear that you're gonna have to overnight something or something. And the Kanban thing, it was like I like downloaded that off my brain, and it's all on paper laminated now, and I don't have to touch it. And it was like there was like just that much less weight on my mind. Felt great, dude. Feels so good.
It's pretty cool. There's also a side effect of it that I see, which is essentially investing as a maker, because what you're really doing is dollar cost averaging your materials.
Yeah.
And it's like you look at it and you're like, okay, inflation goes up, but I had ordered enough steel for 2 runs of knives prior to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
it goes down, and I've only ordered 2 runs of steel.
Yeah. That's why Toyota did it, the lean manufacturing model. So I'm going to quickly go over what a Kanban is. I mean, before we get too far into this. So Kanban, Kanban, one word, Japanese word. And what it is referring to is a bigger system. The Kanban cards that I'm using is a portion of the bigger Kanban system. So when you hear Kanban, it doesn't just mean the cards. It means like a bigger model for organizing manufacturing. But what I've used is the Kanban card method, which is, let's say I've got this all my options for the Overland and the Confidant. Let's say I've got black screws and stainless screws. If I run out of the black screws, there's a card at the bottom of the drawer that has the black screws in it that I get to when I'm out of screws. I look at it. It's got how many new ones I need to order, what vendor, and just a couple other details. Like basically everything I need to know to reorder those screws. Those exact quantity of screws that were in the drawer, I have on a shelf. So when I hit that card, I pull the screws off the shelf, which in my case I do 300 because I'm 300 screws is like what the standard I decided to set. I pour them in the bin. I put that little card in a box that says to order. Now at the end of the week, I might have a couple things that ended up in that bin for to order, and those Kanban cards give me the information to just hit order on like screws, washers. I need green Kydex and whatever sheath clips, and so those head in. But I've got inventory in those bins that's going to last me well beyond the time it's going to take for those products to ship and replace the Kanban inventory.
Right.
And then when they arrive, the card goes back in the drawer, and it just is like a recycle. And what you touched on is the upfront cost of this is it's almost no labor. It's easy to set up, but you have to buy 2x of everything you think you need for a realistic time frame. And so in the case of screws, that's easy. It's like depending on what kind of screws you're using, but for me, it's like pretty affordable. But if you're deciding to Kanban, like even Kydex is pretty expensive if you're doing a lot of volume and like all these little hardware pieces. So I probably spent a couple grand just to double up all my inventory, but it's a one-time expense.
Right.
And so, and like you said, the other advantage is like I got some screws in, stainless screws I ordered. So I replaced the inventory. Stainless screws came in. There was issues. They had burrs. There was like a lot of problems with these screws. Because I already have inventory replaced, I have the time to seek out a new distributor and find a new set of screws. And then I'm not waiting and like gambling that these new screws are going to work because I just replaced my old inventory. So when the inventory comes in to replace it, I always inspect it before I put it in storage
Yep.
to make sure it's good. And then that way, if it's wrong, you have time. And that ups your quality on the long term, in my opinion, because you're not forced like these knives have to go out or I'm going to a show on
Right.
Friday. I have to put the bad screws in the knife. I have to. You don't ever get in that position. So it's a good
huge. I mean,
feeling.
there's so many upsides to that. I mean, not even just to mention like going to a lot of the materials and components that we use are made in small batches. Um, they sell out. Like there's
Another
times where I
reason.
go to order, Hermes 406 J Flex belts and they don't have that belt.
Yep.
This is a problem if you're in the middle of a show when you realize that you're out of belts,
Yep.
or like in show prep and you've got a week left. Like, so you're basically you're solving for future problems in a way that also directly affects kind of your day-to-day operations
Yeah.
because it's one less thing that you have to remember to check to order.
There's no more intuition about it, which is, I
Yeah.
think, the main thing. There's no
Yeah.
like, I think I might be running low on this.
Yeah.
It's like,
Right.
no,
Yeah.
you
We
don't
talk
even
like, so you
care.
talk about that idea of like, you're only able to make like so many decisions
Yeah.
in a day. The more base level decisions that you can offload and automate, like the more
Yeah.
resources you have for high level decisions and like creative work.
Yeah.
Right.
And another thing that saves is like, I can't tell you how many times I'd be like, all right, I'm going to try to ship like 30, 40 knives in the next period of time because I've got them all done and sharpened and I just need to assemble and ship. And then I'm going around like counting stuff to make sure I'm not going to run short on anything. And it's like I found myself literally like counting screws sometimes or like clips
Yep.
to make sure that I'm going to cover these 30 knives to make sure
Yep.
I don't need to order right now. And it's like with this model, you never count anything ever again
Right.
because the inventory is on the shelf. It was counted by the manufacturer.
Right.
So like for example, I order like 100 clips for my Kydex at a time and 100 double binder posts, and they come in a bag. They had to count 100
Right.
because I did go through and there was actually 100 in there, and it's like I have 100 on the shelf that I didn't have to count,
Right.
and when I pour it in the drawer, I know there's 100 in there,
Right.
and I know there's 100 more coming. So there's no more counting. You're not walking around with like a clipboard being like, oh, I'm a little short on this. I think that's enough. You know, like it's all gone.
Well, and it works exceptionally well for production, right? Anything that involves higher numbers. At this point, over the years, I've done different variations that are similar. Like at this point, belts are the only thing that I really pay attention to in like a Kanban like methodology, which is I order belts 25 at a time. So as soon as I get down to 5, I reorder.
Yeah. Similar.
That's
thing.
so it's a very similar concept. I'm going to integrate it purely because I think that it is a best practice that takes very little to implement and has a huge upside, right? So if there's any scaling, if any time, like say I bring in another employee, anything gets more efficient, anything uses more parts. When I first hired Joe, I was amazed. I was like, wow, I'm going through materials in a way that like I had never experienced before. Had I Kanban then, it would have saved me a lot of headaches.
Probably a lot of UPS red label shipping.
Yeah. Just like, what, wait, we're out of handle material? Like, oh man, okay, like I'm gonna find that. If it had just been like, oh, last sheet off the shelf, that gives us 5 more knives in that time. It's reordered, it's here, it's no problem.
Yep.
So I mean, really, where that starts to be at like a 1-person shop, it's super valuable. 2 people, 3 people, it goes up. It starts to be like game changing.
Yeah.
You know?
And
it's pretty cool.
One other little benefit too is like when you get in those positions where you keep running out of stuff, and I know I've been there, like these screws, I keep like running out of screws.
Yeah.
And so the intuition is like, I'm going to buy 1,000 or
Yep.
10,000 screws
Yep.
and I'm never going to run out.
Yeah.
The,
You are.
but the problem with you are going to run out, and that day's going to suck because
Yeah.
the only solution is buy 10,000 more.
Right.
But
And in that time, the price may have gone up so much.
Yep.
It's actually, or so there's two variations on this, which are pretty interesting, right? So you buy 10,000. You're like, man, I am locked in. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You use 2,000 on them, and then you change your model assembly, and now you have 8,000 that are waste. The flip side of that is you get down to 1,000. It took forever. You now have to buy that number again, theoretically, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the manufacturers stopped making them, or they've doubled in price. Like there's so many small things that can happen around that extended timeline.
And that's where you get like Toyota invented this Kanban system, and their phrase is what? It's continual improvement.
Yes.
If you have 10,000 of one item, you are stuck with it. And then as the industry is advancing underneath you, like a cool titanium screw comes out, you're missing out unless you're going to go throw 10,000 screws in your garden. You know what I mean? And so you don't get continual improvement if you have piles and piles of stuff that you have no option but to use. So that's where like with Toyota, they call it just in time manufacturing. So it's like the headlight arrives there and they put it on the Tacoma just in time.
Yep.
And so the next headlight, they're going to tell them, look, this hole wasn't big enough, ream it out.
Right.
Or remold this, or like seal this better. If they deliver 10,000 of them, guess what? What if they're all bad? You know,
the just in time and like the, what was the verbiage you used to describe the Toyota method, which is like continual improvement?
Continual improvement. Yeah.
So that's the way that I look at it. Even though I'm working small batch, I think of continual improvement. So reason, like when I first started making Quikens, I think I forget how many part sets it was, but it was like, I'm going to machine until I'm just like, I have 50 knives or whatever it was at that time. That seemed like some unheard of number. Now I do 5 at a time. And what that allows me to do is I do 5. I see something that I want to change. I update it. Yep. I update the one thing or the 2 things kind of in there, and then I move forward. If it doesn't work, I'm not married to it. If it's just, you just don't get bogged down in the same way. And yet you're constantly improving the product.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I think there really are a lot of benefits. I mean, I'm going to go Kanban my fridge because I don't, I'm sure when I showed Maddie your video, she was probably like, oh my God, we're going to have Kanban everywhere.
I know. I was showing my wife, and I think my mother-in-law was there too. And they were like looking at it, and I was like, you guys should use this totally for any not completely perishable item. Like, you could do it, if you had like spaghetti noodles in there and whatever.
Yep. I want 2 cans of beans on the shelf all times.
One thing I don't have that I want to do is I want to create a spreadsheet, because I just printed Kanbans like left and right.
Right.
I want to go down and make a spreadsheet of a list of the Kanban items that I have in existence.
Right.
Just so that like in the theoretical scenario where I wanted to audit it, to make sure that it hasn't like, devolved or like deteriorated, or like I lost some cards, or I forgot about some cards.
Yep.
Like I want to have like a master list, which I
love have. That.
Be pretty easy to do.
Just I also love your data sheets that you're laminating. That's something that I've wanted to do for a long time. And it's one more thing that like I was designing all 2D. I guess I could do it, and my stuff is simple, but seeing it in practice, it's so beautiful. It's another one where it would bring me joy to have a setup sheet.
Yeah.
But if you have someone else running parts, it's like a game changer. It's critical.
And another thing is, if you guys want to like print something out on 8.5 by 11 and then proceed to actually care about it, laminate it.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. There's this intuitive thing. Like I found when I laminate something and I put it like on a magnet on the machine, it seems official. It seems permanent. It seems like I have to
I think we're dealing with like some human nature. Like you're dealing with some old knowledge. Well, it's like, is it art? It's framed essentially. You're like, it's protected. It's framed. It's sealed.
Yep. And so like if you just print a piece of paper and like throw it out in your shop, and it's like, make sure this bore diameter and this length is right. It's like, well, it's probably going to get all oily, and then you're going to like drop it on the floor, and then you're probably going to throw it away. But if it's like laminate it, and then you start to care, and then it starts to stick.
Overall, I think that ties into the like idea of like clean shop, clean work.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know some people love to have like the messiest,
Which has
ground
a
zero
feng
shop.
shui about it
Yeah, like I
sometimes.
get it that you want like this like organized chaos.
Mm-hmm.
But I love just having a really organized and clean space to work.
Same.
And so I think that really ties in. It's like, okay, we make things that are special, right? Like it's special to a person for whatever reason, but it's not, maybe not precious. Like I'm not
It's
looking
not
for that word,
disposable.
but it's not a disposable, and we take pride in it. And I think that for us making it, the steps that you take to make it, if you have pride in those steps, like I think it makes a better product. Like,
You know what's a good phrase for that?
what?
The process is the product.
Oh, oh man, I love it so much. It's been coming up like so much lately.
Yep.
Um,
Man, I found
you should
for
probably get that as
real.
like a chest tattoo.
I know, right? Like flex the biceps,
Yeah,
like all
yeah.
the way elbow to elbow. Like, but for sure,
Pretty
no,
good.
that phrase does resurface all the time for me. So I don't know about you guys if it's resonating with you, or if it just sounds like dribble, but it does seem to keep coming up for me.
I mean,
I
I
like it.
repeat it 5 times before I go to sleep at night.
Yeah, right. Yeah, gotta say your prayers, man.
Yes, I gotta say
right.
prayers. Man, okay, so we're coming into the end of the year. This is actually huge, man. We started a podcast this year.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
We've done it. We've been doing it.
Yeah.
I think we probably have some plans moving forward.
Who wants
exciting?
The process is the product t-shirt or hat? If you want that, please comment on Instagram or send us a DM.
Hand.
Yeah, we're both excited for that. So we might make 2, but if you want one, we'll make more than that.
At least 2.
Yeah.
Oh man,
because I wear my shirts out and get them gluey and dirty.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to get my hands on some like merch ideas, and just like I have so much fun with that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you and we need to do like a year-end meeting and like figure out some of the stuff we want to. I just want to like recap the year and like figure out where we're going and what else we want to do.
Yeah,
Edge and Flow Summit, Fiji.
Right.
Yeah,
we had a massive sponsor come in and try to pick us up. So we're trying to decide if like if Edge and Flow by Amazon is the right move.
If it sounds good, man, wouldn't that be so delightful?
Or I mean, we already turned down the Edge and Flow by Great Value deal, but
Oh man, cool. Yeah, we'll get one or 2 more of these out before the end of the year. I think.
I think so.
Yes, guys, thank you for listening. Please leave us a review, share the podcast with your friends and family and other data and making nerds.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you all.
And we'll talk to you guys in a week or so.
Peace.
See ya.